The Sacramento Kings stayed at number 13 in the NBA draft lottery. The Hawks, they won it. They moved to number 1. Let's put a pin in the Hawks because they don't matter. This to me, based on the analysis of the Hawks moving up to number 1, and Zach Lowe wrote about this because if you're unfamiliar with how the draft lottery works, the actual lottery happens in a room where no laptops, no cell phones, and the lottery happens, and then they put it on TV later. They do a televised version.
They're sequestered to a room without their devices, and they're there to make sure the authenticity of the draft.
Right.
Like Zach Lowe is usually in the room. I think Ben Golliver was in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Sean Highkin that covers the Portland Trailblazers.
Portland,
Like there's representation from almost every city that's in the lottery. I don't think Sacramento had somebody, but if they don't, it's usually like a team representative.
So here's how, and again, this is Zach Lowe. You can read about this in ESPN. It's fascinating. He describes the whole system. It's great. But he said that last year, because everybody has 4-digit numbers, and they pull the ping pong balls, and their first 3 numbers come up, and then there was this like palpable anticipation because that number was going to go to whatever team is going to get Victor Wembanyama. And so the anticipation was like palpable. Like he said, people were like on edge. Even before the process, there was like nervous chatter. And you could just tell. And then this year it happened. And the reaction was, man, can you imagine if that happened last year? Nobody gave a rip that the Hawks had the 9th best odds to get the number 1 pick and got it.
Yeah. That's
3%
crazy.
chance. Just nobody cared. So this to me feels like, based on all that, and like you said, at some point during the draft process, some guy's going to jump out of the gym and hit 99 out of 100 threes in a workout, and everybody's going to be like, holy crap, number 1 pick. At some point, that'll happen. But based on what we know right now, and based on that reaction to the lottery, this is probably the preferable outcome for the Kings. They just stayed at 13. They don't have to worry about the draft slot. They don't have to worry about trying to move the pick for pennies. They can hang out here. And if a trade materializes, great. If not, you see how the board falls and you draft a player who maybe can help you this year. Maybe he's a developmental piece. Who knows? It just, this to me makes things a lot more straightforward for Sacramento.
Oh, I totally agree. And I also think if you look at the top of the draft, would it go Atlanta, Washington? Like, that's good. Even the Spurs were able to get an extra pick.
Yes.
But this is the year that you want the Spurs to get an extra pick. You're like, yes.
Yes.
So, you got an extra pick.
So this is brutal. So Atlanta, Washington, Houston are the top 3. So it was Toronto. If they had been in the top 6, their pick would have kept their pick. But instead they ended up falling to 8. So their pick now conveys to San Antonio.
Oh yeah.
Which sucks for San Antonio, because Toronto is probably not going to be very good next year. And I believe it would have been unprotected had it conveyed next year.
Oof.
Or it might have been top 3 protected, whatever it was. But this is a bad draft per all the analysis. And now San Antonio has the pick from the Jakob Poeltl trade convey this year instead of next year or beyond. That's tough.
It is tough.
San Antonio.
It's tough. And I also think that, like, once the pick goes down, like, first of all, Atlanta...
Oh, Hawks were 10. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're celebrating, right? Like, which they should, because they're a team that's caught in the middle, right? They're really a team that's not good, but also not horrible, and that's the worst place to be in the NBA. I mean, the Kings sat there for like the entirety of the 80s and 90s, where they're drafting number 7 every single time.
That was even in the early to mid 2010s. It was a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
There were just enough there where you're like, yeah, okay, you can kind of talk yourself into it, and then
it's tough when you're drafting. What, Lionel Simmons was the 7th pick, Walt Williams was the 7th pick, Bobby Hurley was the 7th pick.
I mean, that's just
Jason Williams.
Out of how many drafts do you go? This is a 4-player draft.
Yeah.
5-player draft. So when you're at 7, it's like,
yeah. I think Brian Grant was number 8. Yeah, they had the 1 year, the Lionel Simmons year, where they had 7, they had 14, they had 19, they had 22. They had 4 first-round picks.
And not a single one in a prime spot.
No.
Oh,
Well, I mean, the
man.
only one that like Lionel Sims at least had a career, but it was short lived.
Yeah, man, that is brutal for the Hawks.
It's good though because I sent you the little thing from Bobby Marks. It kind of showed what I was talking about last week that
Yeah.
I don't think people were totally cluing in on. The Hawks, because they moved from 10 to 1, that pick is valued so high that all of a sudden they're out. They got to pay. Like they're not only that, but now they're in luxury tax range, and they're going to have to figure out a way to clear some cap space. And that's not the best position to be in. But again, they're at 180.5 million in dedicated salary for next year. The tax threshold is 171.3, and we're talking about a bad team, right? So,
but a bad team that looks at Trae Young as a foundational piece, and they have DeJounte Murray, and they have Clint Capella, and they've got Bogdan Bogdanovic, and they have Sadiq Bey, who's an unrestricted free agent.
Yeah, I'd have to look that up. That's possible that Sadiq Bey is unrestricted.
But either way, you look at their accumulation of players and you go, this should be a better team than it is. But it's not. And at this point, like, this is a great opportunity to blow it up. You have the number 1 pick in a draft. Whoever, regardless of whether you think that player is a future All-NBA guy or whatever, you go use that pick, you blow it up, you try and accumulate assets, and you start at ground zero.
Yeah.
You absolutely have to. But Trae Young is a good enough player that I could see their front office talking themselves into, well, if we just surround him with the right guys, and that is just not the move, man.
It's such a mistake. It is.
But so many teams do it.
They do.
Like, yeah, we've got this guy. Just like, do you?
Do you though? Yeah, it's not a great position to be in. Yeah, qualifying offer for Sadiq Bey is $6.5 million. That puts them in a weird spot with Sadiq Bey because, like, I don't know what you do there because you're gonna, in order to keep him and to go over and to like sign the number 1 overall pick, you're gonna go deep into the luxury tax for a team that's not good.
Oh man.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Poor Hawks.
I think the Hawks are going to, like, they know that they're not good. Like, I've talked to some people within the walls of theirs. They know they're not good. And even at the deadline, they were very prepared to, like, have a yard sale.
Yeah.
Yeah. They, like, the sign was out.
But that's the thing is nobody wants what they have, at least not for what they were asking for.
Yeah. Even, like, here in Sacramento, we love Bogdan Bogdanovic, but he's owed 17.3, 16, and 16
pass
over the next 3 years. That's a lot of cash. So
I guess he's older now too, right? Isn't he like 31?
I think he's older than that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. He didn't age like Buddy Hield, but
no, nobody does that.
Yeah. Let me see, how old is Bogey? Bogey, wrong Bogdanovic.
Nope. Yeah, that's probably Bojan. He's like 35.
He is 35. The other Bogey is 31. He'll be 32 in August.
Yeah, so he'll be 32 to start, and he's owed that kind of money.
3 more years at like
he's a fine player, but at probably less than that.
Yeah. And he had a great season, 16.9 points, 3.4 assists, 3.1 assists, 3.4 rebounds.
Yeah.
Shot 37%. But yeah, I think that it's time for them to have, I think they've gone beyond yard sales. This is like a rummage sale.
Dude, they have to.
Yeah, there's like a free bin at this one.
You're doing you're just doing your team a disservice by trying to drag this out another year.
Yeah.
It just, so maybe you're not going to get exactly what you were hoping for, but they did the same thing with John Collins. They sat there and John Collins, 2 firsts. It's going to take 2 firsts to get, and they held on to him. They They got nowhere, and they eventually had to give him away
for a bag of peanuts.
And
yeah,
I'm. This is why I'd be terrible in a front office.
Well,
because I can sit here on the radio and I can go, the very obvious move is to blow everything up.
This is the move. Then
you got to sell that to a fan base. You have to sell tickets.
Yeah, but they don't sell tickets there anyways. Yeah, if I'm them, I'm looking at Clint Capella. I'm looking at DeAndre Hunter. I'm looking at Bogdanovic. Like, all of these guys are going to be available. And then I'm looking at Trae Young. If you're going to reset this thing, like,
that's the piece.
Yeah.
That's the piece.
Yeah, Trae Young is a guy that you probably can get a lot of value for, and you can move forward and reset your roster. And you still have DeJounte, and you still have players around, that might be able to be reasonable and help you out. You've got Okongwu under contract for another 4 years. You Hunter's under contract for 3 years. These are young guys that you can kind of build around. They do have Jalen Johnson, who's cheap for a long time.
Hey, do you know what DeJounte Murray's contract looks like?
It's not great.
He's 25.5 next year.
Yep.
25.5 million. He's 28 years old. Then 27.5, 29.5. And then at age 31 in the 27-28 season, he has a $31.5 million player option.
You know what, though? I will say this about DeJounte Murray. I mean, first of all, he made an all-star team. But this is kind of what we talked about before about players that maybe aren't max money guys that you can get for less than max money. And it's not usual that a player will take less, right? Mm-hmm. But that's what that kind of feels like. This isn't I don't think this is his second contract. He's 27 years old. So this should be his third contract. Mm-hmm. And so you do have him at less than max money, which for a guy who, again, made an all-star team, that's really not horrific. I know it's not what you really want to pay.
If he still played defense like he played when he made an all-star team, great.
Yeah, but you're looking at a 27-year-old who averaged 22.5 with 6.4 assists and 5.3 rebounds and 1.4 steals. I don't know. Like I wouldn't. I like we had this discussion before. Would you trade for DeJounte? And that would be a tough one. Although his contract, again, if you're looking at players of that ilk, his contract isn't horrific.
Yeah.
Anyway, it brought me to the question of can you work with that team specifically to, number one, save them money, and number two, get the player that you want out of somewhere else?
Yeah, you have an excellent trade idea here. So let's lay this out.
Well, I mean, again, this is just like, hey, let's throw stuff against the wall. This isn't something I'm hearing.
Yeah, this isn't. Yeah, so just to make this very straight, this is a hypothetical. Hey, these numbers work.
Yeah.
What does this look like? Let's discuss it.
Yeah, exactly. So my idea was if the Kings were to go try to get Brandon Ingram, they're going to have a problem that they can't offer a player that will truly help, I think, New Orleans right now. They can potentially offer a player, right, that could be in their rotation, but not that would really, really push them forward. So if I was the Kings, I would try to get Atlanta involved, because I think Trae Young could help the Pelicans. So my offer would be Harrison Barnes, Davion Mitchell, Chris Duarte, a 2025 first round pick from the Pelicans. The Kings would concede their rights to the 2024 pick, which is the 13th pick in the draft, but also a 2026 and a 2028 goes to Atlanta. So Atlanta would pick up 4 first round picks. Barnes, Davion Mitchell, Chris Duarte. That's what the Hawks would get. So 4 firsts. The Kings would get Brandon Ingram, and the Pelicans would get Trae Young.
So they get 2026 from Sac and 2028.
And like concede the 2024, which would be basically just pulling the restrictions off of the current pick that they owe Atlanta.
Okay. Got this written down on the whiteboard so we can flash it up for people.
Okay.
At some point. I don't have the stream up.
Yeah.
Am I good here?
Yeah.
Look right?
Yep, that makes sense.
Okay. So ostensibly, here's the deal. Who says no kind of thing. We'll put that on hold for a second. So the Kings are ostensibly trading for Brandon Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
They are trading Harrison Barnes, Davion Mitchell, Chris Duarte, and 3 firsts for Brandon Ingram.
Yeah. Now, here's the other caveat I would add. Like, Brandon Ingram's in the final year of a $36 million deal.
Okay, so let's put a pin in that.
Okay.
Because that's what I want to talk about next.
Okay.
But this is the kind of move that, again, let's take Brandon Ingram out of this. Let's just insert player of that caliber here.
Yes.
This is the kind of move that I think the Kings need to make this offseason. This is the kind of swing I think they need to go take. We talk about, hey, could the 13th pick contribute? Hey, how do you feel about this role player like Bones Highland? And how do you feel about this guy? Okay, those are all fractional things. I'm of the mind that the Kings this year need to make some kind of major move where they are offloading a bunch of their assets in one, not in a bunch of smaller deals to add to the margins of the roster. No, I want a big deal that's going to bring in a player of this ilk. And this right here, what you have put together in your hypothetical world, this is the kind of move I think they need to be a part of.
Yeah, and like, I don't know that this type of move is like necessarily out there. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but I would even like caution people, like, there is a way that like trades like this could happen, because what you're trying to do is fill the needs of multiple teams at one time, right?
Yeah.
So I think we can all say that we know the Pelicans need a point guard. They need more 3-point shooting. They need a star to put next to Trae Young. We can also look at Atlanta. I mean, next to Zion Williamson. I'm sorry. We can look at Atlanta and say Atlanta needs, if they just got the number 1 overall pick, they really need to go all in on that. You know, again, you can keep Jalen Johnson, you can keep DeAndre Hunter. They're young enough, but the realistic thing that they need to do is reset everything. So could you do something to go get 3 or 4 first-round picks for Trae Young? I don't think you're going to get that from one team, but what you can do is you can get it from multiple teams. For the Kings, this is really not like giving up 3 first-round picks for Brandon Ingram. It's giving up like 2.25, because you already owe Atlanta this pick, the 2025. So I think it would do 2 things. Number 1, it would move up the timeline for Atlanta, where they're getting a 24, a 26, and a 28, as opposed to a 25, a 27, and a 29.
Sure.
Plus, it also guarantees them a lottery pick, not what you might have next offseason from the Kings, which could be much better for the Kings than a lottery pick, than a top 12 pick. So I just think that it would help all 3 teams. And I also, if I'm not mistaken, in a weird way, you could probably figure out this trade with DeJounte Murray being the player that goes to Atlanta. I mean, goes to the Pelicans instead of Trae. It would just mean like taking out one of the players from the Kings side.
Okay. I love the idea of Trae Young with the Pelicans, where you're taking some of that onus off of CJ McCollum to be a shot creator at this stage of his career, because that just clearly wasn't enough. And it gives you an additional playmaker where when Zion Williamson is out, it's not all on CJ McCollum, or like, yeah, hey, we need Trey Murphy to have a huge game and Herb Jones to be a player he's not. Like, no, man, you have a really, I'm hesitant on Trae Young as like the guy for a team, but here he's not. It would be Zion Williamson, and they believe in Trey Murphy's ascension as a go-to scorer for them. And I really like Trae Young as a playmaker. I like him as a playmaker even more than I like him as a scorer.
I also think it would give you the ability to play Herb Jones alongside Trae Young for large stretches. And I think that could mask a lot of what he does wrong. As a player.
That's what Atlanta tried to do with DeJounte Murray, and it didn't work.
No, it didn't.
They regressed a little bit on that end.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to talk about, we have to hit a break, but I want to talk about Brandon Ingram specifically, because that's the part of this that you throw New Orleans in there, and we just talked about Trae Young, how he helps them. You laid out nicely how this all works for Atlanta. We're getting some young players. You're giving a player like Davion Mitchell a chance to really play and grow. Same thing with Chris Duarte. You're loading up on picks to either move for another asset or to use in drafts in the future. Like, you're just that's how a rebuild should go. So I love that idea. You sent me this trade yesterday, and you said, who says no? And I said, if I'm the Kings, I'm not, but if I was, I would say no. And I will tell you why